This game makes me harder than prison bars. In 2017, a small indie game studio known as Team Cherry released a game called Hollow Knight. It's one of the most unique games that I've ever had a chance of playing. In it, you play as this little knight who goes about beating the living smithereens out of every bug known to mankind. And goodness, does Team Cherry make it fun. Like seriously, I didn't think beating up bugs would be this much fun. You start the game off by jumping into this vast, corrupted wasteland with no concept or idea of what you're doing or why. Now, I can totally understand how fellow gamers can feel about not knowing what the story is to a game immediately, but Team Cherry decides to take a thoughtful approach to both world building and how it tells its story. Team Cherry places these markers all throughout the map in which players can go ahead and try to read them in order to understand more of the story. The reason that they do this is because 70% of gamers are American. Chances are, if you're really American, you kind of just want to blow and smash everything up as fast as possible with no regard for anything else in the world. And since 70% of gamers fall underneath the "This is America" category, they let people that just want to beat everything up and beat the game do just that. Call of Duty maintaining such high popularity among gamers despite having the same central game design for over 10 years is a prime example of this idea. But what Team Cherry also does is that they let people that really want to understand the story go ahead and explore areas of the map that they wouldn't normally explore to find more of these lore tablets. They know that people that care more about the game are going to be putting in more hours into the project, and they take advantage of that. And while 90% of gamers can't read, the small 10% of people that can read the tablets will have a deep and genuine appreciation for this. The game approaches showing its quote-unquote tutorial in a very subtle and enticing way. You can't help but feel a strong sense of curiosity as soon as you jump down into the gap. And the further you play and get through the game, the more that sense of curiosity is going to grow. What I love about the beginning of the game is that it doesn't force the tutorial down my throat like hard to swallow pills after I've been to a doctor. Instead, it chooses to let the player naturally learn the game. Much like how a new college student isn't babysitted anymore like he was in high school, Hollow Knight doesn't teach you every single little thing. It lets you experiment and try new things, and eventually, this leads to an understanding of the controls what the main gameplay is based upon. But enough with the introduction. Is Hollow Knight a good game and worth your money? I want to go ahead and get this out of the way first. When you think about difficulty in video games, it's really hard to find the ideal sweet spot for any game. So many different games have this entire selected difficulty model, and usually these difficulties go from playing with your toes and still beating the game by a large margin to not blinking for 5 goddamn minutes straight to understand and process what in the blazes is happening on your display. Hollow Knight said, nah, screw that. It has one difficulty, well, two if you talk about Sumo, but I don't want to talk about that, okay? And I'm gonna go ahead and tell you right now, Hollow Knight isn't an easy game. By no means at any point did I feel that the game was just not hard enough. In fact, I consider Hollow Knight to be a fairly challenging game, and one that will really test your patience and ability to not destroy your Pro Controller or keyboard that obviously makes you 2 times better at every game you play. But Hollow Knight does such a good job of finding the ideal sweet spot I mentioned before, in which you still enjoy the game, but also find it challenging. Every time I died to a boss, I never once thought that, oh, this was just garbage game design and it's the game's fault that I died there. I always knew at specifically what point in the fight that I had messed up. Oh, and if I haven't mentioned this before, you might want to get used to bosses. There's a lot of them. See, when making a difficult game, I think it requires a lot of insight and practical thinking to make something that makes the player upset or mad at themselves instead of at the game. It's just so easy for us humans to blame something else for our own inherent lack of skill and understanding. Sekiro? Every time that gorilla came back to life, I just died inside and hated the game for that portion of the story. However, with Hollow Knight, I was able to stay relatively calm and collected even when I died for the 20th time on the same boss. And yes, that happened. I think that the reason this is able to be accomplished in an indie game out of all things is just how well structured and polished the game feels in general. Every boss fight and every enemy in the game has a very specific range of attacks and patterns that they will perform. What's great about these patterns, especially when we talk about the bosses, is that while they always do repeat, there's just enough variety and strategic timing of attacks to keep the fights intense and engaging, while also being surprisingly fair. But it's not just the bosses and enemies that feel so polished. The spells and upgrades that you get are rounded off so well. It's impossible to believe that there's such a huge variety of tools that were able to be developed in such a complete and uniform manner. Hollow Knight has a huge emphasis on 2D platforming. That's the genre of game that it is. And personally, I've always been a huge fan of platformers, just because of the immense feeling of satisfaction you get from playing them. Hollow Knight blew platforming out of the water. The platforming feels so balanced and whole that you get such a sense of wonder and joy over nailing difficult jumps and dashes. Your sense of curiosity that I mentioned that you have all throughout the game is nicely complemented by the allure of unknown paths and areas that hold mysteries for you to discover. There are so many moves that not only let you explore new areas, but also even complement your future fights and help you survive more. There's a dash, jump, double jump, super dash, guarded shadowy dash thingy with demons, wall jumping, sliding down walls, pogoing on top of enemies and spikes. There is so much that you can do. It's great. Hollow Knight really does such a great job with the entire Metroidvania concept. The one thing I hate in any game, no matter what it may be, is the idea of stagnation. I hate that feeling you get when you're just stuck in one place and have no hope for variety. Hollow Knight has so much diversity in the game, it's actually insane. When you first start off, the only movement you have is jumping and running places. None of those other movement methods that I mentioned are with you. The game does a great job of making you feel that you're constantly on the verge of the next big thing. You're never bored and you never feel that you don't want to discover more of the map. And the map's huge, dude. Like, bigger than Chipotle burritos. Huge. There is so much to explore and discover. It's insane. The areas all feel so unique from one another, with so many paths, interesting characters and NPCs, and movement upgrades, spells, combat upgrades, and weirdos. You're always feeling a sense of progression, and I love that. The soundtrack to this game is also something that I feel is really worth mentioning. You hear this right now? That is the menu music. I have never heard menu music this good. In every aspect of the game, there is music. The music is such an important part of the game. Whenever the music stops, you know that, oh, okay, this is a serious moment, or this is about to be a boss fight. Whenever the music picks up, it's usually when you're fighting a harder enemy or a mini boss or even a boss. When the music's relaxing, you know that this is supposed to be an area of the game that isn't as corrupted. Music plays such a pivotal role in storytelling and pacing. It is insane. Team Cherry did an outstanding job with the music, and I love the OST. The game's $15. At the time of recording this video, I beat the game with 31.7 hours. I'm gonna say that one more time. 31.7 hours. That number is huge for a single player game, especially one that's only $15. But if that's not enough for you, there are 5 different endings that require you to do different things in order to get them. I had 31.7 hours with only one of them. I never touched the free DLCs that came with the game that added even more content. I have seen many of the friends on my Steam's friends list with over 50 hours in the game, and for a game as amazing as this, it's so worth the almost trivial $15 price tag. I give Hollow Knight a final rating of a flawless 10 out of 10. The game is just too good. Seriously, if you haven't played this game yet, I highly recommend you go and try the game out. You won't regret it. Oh, and Hornet's a waifu, woo!